Hey guys, so yeah, I guess we can start. So today I'll be discussing about how to manage your SSIDs using the EnGenius cloud. So maybe some of you guys are really familiar with the cloud, maybe some of you have tested it, or most of you most likely are more familiar with the Easy Master or the NSky solution. So it's a bit different when you configure the SSIDs on NSky, on the Easy Master, on the EnGenius controller switch, or on the access point itself when they're on standalone mode versus when you're using the cloud. So if you guys can see the screen, let me go ahead and go straight to my SSIDs. Now, if you're not familiar with this interface yet, the way that you can access your SSIDs is first you have to select your hierarchy. So right now I have a lot of organizations here. So let me go to my test network and then select test here. So once I have selected my network, on the left hand portion, when I go to configure, I have an option here for the SSID. So I'm starting off blank. So in order to add an SSID to your network, just click on add on the right hand corner. By the way, all the SSIDs on this field will be applied on all the access points that are on this network. Let's say you're managing 50 access points, they'll have exactly the same SSIDs that you put in right here. So when you add an SSID, you'll be given a bunch of options. First part is very simple, very obvious. This is your SSID name. So this is what will appear as your Wi-Fi name. So in this scenario, let me just put it as test SSID. The second option is whether you want to enable this SSID or not. So if you disable it, basically it's not broadcasting, nobody can connect to it. So let's enable that. Third option, hide. This means if you want your SSID to be broadcasting, but it's hidden, meaning when you try to connect to Wi-Fi, usually you would select the Wi-Fi network name. If it's a hidden SSID, it would show as a hidden network. So when you connect there, it's going to ask you for two things. First is the SSID name, which you have to fill it in, and then the password. So this enhances the security so that your SSID is not exposed, and then you sort of have two levels of security. First, the person connecting must know what your SSID name is. You can only get that from IT. Second is the password. Usually for guest networks, office environment, the SSID is not hidden. So right now, let's not hide that. The fourth option is important because here you can select which radio you're going to use to broadcast that Wi-Fi network name. So it's either 2.4 only, 5 gigahertz only, or both 2.4 and 5 gig. Most cases will leave this on both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. So you have more concurrent users that can connect. This option right here, client IP mode. So you have two options, bridge mode and NAT mode. Bridge mode means your IP address is given out by your existing DHCP server. So let's say you have a gateway, you have a router behind where the AP is plugged in. So all the IP addresses that the guests will have will be coming from that device. If you set it to NAT mode, it turns the access point into a DHCP server. So all the guests, all the clients connecting to this test SSID would have an IP address coming from your access point. So in a way, it helps you mask your internal network. If it's a guest environment, those guests connecting to this SSID with NAT mode, they won't be able to see your internal SSID. VLAN right here is more on for, let's say you want to tag a VLAN to a specific SSID. Maybe your network has multiple VLANs running. Let's say one VLAN for sales, one VLAN for the tech team, another VLAN for admin or the backend system. So you can tag those specific VLAN IDs. In turn, what it does is, let's say right now I set it to VLAN ID 1. So I can only access devices or communicate with devices on VLAN ID 1. If I create another VLAN, let's say I want to create VLAN 20, maybe for the sales team. So here, those that are on this VLAN ID 20, I can only communicate with them. But of course, the VLAN ID that you set on the access points should match the VLAN configuration that you have on your layer 2 switch on the backend, because that's where all your VLAN configuration will be. Your AP will just follow. So if you don't use VLAN ID, everything will just pass through. This option right here, app detection, what it's used for is actually not for the EnGenius Cloud application. This is used for layer 7 awareness, so that your access point would be able to identify what type of data is running on the background. Let me go to one of my hierarchy to show you guys. For example, here in our office environment, I have my client list. So when I open my client list, I'll be able to see, wait, let me move some windows. I'll be able to see what type of applications are commonly used here. Let's say through HTTP, HTTPS, Facebook, Dropbox, YouTube, Skype, etc. So those commonly used apps would show you the details, how much is downloaded on this particular network or uploaded. What's the usage, what's the percentage, and so on and so forth. So with the cloud system, you'll be able to monitor a lot of things, but I'll go through that on another webinar session. So let me go back to SSIDs. So again, if you want to enable layer 7 awareness, if you want to enable layer 7 awareness, you just have to enable app detection here. 802.11r here means fast roaming. So let's say you have a couple of APs or multiple access points on your network, and you want to seamlessly transfer from one AP to another without getting disconnected. So enable 802.11r. So for those client devices that support it, you'll be able to roam without disconnection. Let's say you're using WhatsApp to call somebody, and then you're walking around the area where you have your APs deployed. You wouldn't get disconnected even if you switch automatically to your other APs. Here under advanced settings, you have a couple more options. So layer 2 isolation makes your SSID more secure. What it does is it blocks communication from the client device connected to this network going to the internal network and to other wireless devices as well. So basically it isolates the client to stop peer-to-peer communication or client-to-server communication. Band steering, pretty much straightforward. Basically, it transfers clients from 2.4 to 5 gig, so that it makes it more. You have a better experience on the Wi-Fi connectivity. Because with Wi-Fi, usually 2.4 is pretty congested. You have less channels to select from. 5 gigahertz channel width is pretty wide, so you have more bandwidth, and you want more clients to connect on the 5 gig radio versus 2.4. Usually, I will leave the setting to force 5 gigahertz and just let the AP handle everything. But don't worry, if you have a client device that's only capable of connecting for 2.4 connections, if you set it to force 5 gig, they would still be able to connect to the 2.4 gigahertz radio. You notice when I click on apply, I get an error here. WPA passphrase cannot be empty. Because I selected fast roaming, and fast roaming requires either of these two authentication types. So let me move on to the next tab, association. So fast roaming requires to use either WPA2 PSK or WPA2 Enterprise. So open network means it's basically an open SSID. Everyone can connect without a password. WPA2 PSK, this is the normal Wi-Fi setup where you have a Wi-Fi network name and a password. So let's say my password is password, apply that. Yeah, I don't know if you guys noticed, but while I was typing that password, you notice this QR code on the bottom is changing. So what the use of this QR code is, for example, let's say I set up a coffee shop, a hotspot, or in a cafe. Instead of giving out vouchers or passwords, what I can do is I can copy this QR code, paste it on the wall, paste it on a table. So if somebody wants to connect to my Wi-Fi network, they just have to scan this QR code and they automatically be connected. But the password would not be stored on that client device. So when they scan this QR code, they'll be connected to Wi-Fi. But as soon as they disconnect or they go out of the vicinity, they'll be disconnected. So they can't just hang out outside the cafe to remain connected to your Wi-Fi network. So again, any connections using the QR code, it won't be stored on the client device. WPA2 Enterprise is for connections or authentications using a Radius server. So right now we have two options. First is EnGenius Cloud Radius. So EnGenius Cloud Radius is basically our own Radius server built on the cloud. You can access that through the cog and then go to configure and then Cloud Radius users. Here you can key in a database of usernames and passwords, those that you want to log into your system. Let's say the client has an existing Radius server already, so you can select custom Radius. Let's say it's a third-party hotspot gateway server or a third-party Radius server. And then from here, they can fill in the details. Authentication type, depending on what type of Radius server is in use, it can be a CHAP or a PAP. And then server IP would be the Radius server IP address, the port number, and the password. So this details right here are taken out from the Radius server. So if a client has an existing Radius server, usually he would know what to fill in on this portion right here. So server number 2 is for your alternate or your secondary server. In case server 1 goes off, it still knows where to connect. Accounting service use, let's say you want to integrate the system to a PMS server or to a billing system for Wi-Fi monetization. So this is what it's used for. Okay, moving on to traffic shaping. This one is pretty straightforward. Basically, this allows you to limit the upload or download speed on the client devices. Right now, it's only available in Mbps or megabits per second, but we'll be adding an option to have kilobytes per second as well, or kbps. So let's say I set it to 1 mbps. With this settings, all the clients would share a throughput of 1 mbps. If you want each client to have a limit of 1 MB, then I just check per user. That means that this SSID will utilize the full bandwidth, but per user, the cap is 1 Mbps speed. So in a hotspot environment, public environment, this one will be very useful. So even if somebody is just torrenting all day in an office network, or let's say streaming YouTube videos all day, they wouldn't be able to slow down the network because we're limiting it per user. Captive portal. Compared to the Easy Master, we have a lot of options now on the captive portal portion. So let me go through one by one because they're also named differently. First one is click through. If you guys are familiar with Splash and Go, so let's say you connect to an SSID, you get a splash page. Maybe it's if you go to a cafe, you get a menu, you get an advertisement or something like that. So click through works the same way. You get a splash page before you're able to log into the network. Later on, I'll show you guys this splash page screen, what options they have. So click through is basically you have a splash page. The guys can click on continue to browse the internet. So it's like a welcome screen. EnGenius authentication. This is tied with the EnGenius Cloud Radius server, the cloud users. So here, if I go to splash page, you would see different options now. Instead of just hitting continue, it would require them to enter a email and password first, which you can create on this cloud system. Third option would be custom radius. So similar as the association tab, you have an option to key in a third-party radius server or a third-party hotspot gateway system. And then from there, you can just integrate. Fourth option is very useful, voucher service. So a lot of people have been requesting for this function. Basically, what you can do with a voucher service is you can generate vouchers either randomly or print it out. And then from there, clients can connect to it depending on how much allocation time you've provided, allocation period. So let me show you guys that right now. So I selected voucher service. Here you can start the plan, whether the client first use the voucher, then the time will start to tick, or when you create the account first. So in this sample, let's select when the account is created. So when I add a plan, I can select how much time I want to give for the Wi-Fi connection. 1 hour, a few days, how many users, limited to one user session, or unlimited number of devices. So for example, let's say it's for a coffee shop. So I put 1 hour, maybe let's say 2 hours for 2 devices, maybe for a laptop and a mobile phone. So apply that. So you would see that reflect on the bottom. So if you want to generate the vouchers, wait, let me apply this SSID first. So if you want to generate the actual vouchers, like the usernames and password, all you need to do is copy this link. This would be your front desk access link, and paste it on your URL. So it's going to ask you to sign in again. So just sign in using your admin account or your front desk account. And then here you're going to see the front desk screen. So under access plans for guest pass, it's going to show the types of plans that I have available. So let me add another plan so you guys can see. Yeah, so I added another plan, a 1-day access or 2-hour access. So the front desk staff or the person managing the cafe can then select what type of plan you want to provide for the guest client, for the Wi-Fi client. And then you can either auto-generate a guest pass or manually create a pass. So here, if I select user ID, let's say user ID for, let's say for a cafe is user 123, generate guest pass. So the password will automatically be randomized. If I want it totally random, I can do so. If I want it totally customized, I mean, you can customize both. If you want the password to be simpler, let's say cafe 101. Password is also cafe 101. Generate guest pass. And then when I go to my voucher database, I can see all those accounts that I have created. So let me create another plan with 1-day access. So here you can see 4 users that I have created. You can see the expiry time. The other one expires a day later because I selected 1-day access. Who created it? What's the password? What's the user ID? What's the plan details? So if I want to print this out, I can just select which ones I want to print. Click on print on the right side, and then your vouchers would be shown like this. So you have the EnGenius logo, SSID of which SSID you need to connect to access this. What's the user ID? What's the password? And the expiration date for this voucher. So this is very useful for like cafes or small hotels. So for the voucher service and the splash page portion, we're still expanding this. So expect some more changes towards the end of the year. So next option would be social login. So here, basically, instead of using a username and password for Wi-Fi access, it's basically gonna ask you to log in using Facebook. So when you connect to the SSID, it's gonna prompt a Facebook login authentication. Once you authenticate, that means you'll be able to log into the Wi-Fi system already. But EnGenius does not collect any data from the users. So usernames and password would be still kept privately. Redirect URL is if you want to redirect a person after they have authenticated. Let's say I was using maybe a voucher service. So once they authenticated using their voucher, you can redirect them to a specific page. Maybe the client's Facebook page or the coffee shop's homepage or something like that. So you can type in the URL right here and the clients will be redirected there. Under advanced settings, you have a few more options. One is a session timeout. Let's say after 5 minutes, you want the client to be kicked out so that when he connects to the SSID, he would see the splash page again. Let's say you have promotions on the splash page or advertisements that you want the client to see over and over. So you can set a session timeout limit right here. Same with idle timeout. So let's say they connected but remain idle for 5 minutes. So the device would automatically be kicked from your Wi-Fi network and requires them to re-log in again after the timeout session. But if you don't want the clients to be kicked out very often, you can just extend your timeout limit. Walled garden is used for third-party hotspot gateway systems. Let's say you're using a hotspot gateway server, and then you want specific access to that IP. For example, my hotspot gateway server is running on my local network, and then I put the URL right here on the wall garden. So clients who try to authenticate to the system would be able to access that without any issues. Basically, it allows access to specific addresses without authenticating yet. Splash page portion, right now it's not that customizable. You can change the welcome message, the welcome screen, the color behind. But the background, like let's say pictures or logos, we haven't enabled it yet, but you'll be able to upload your own background and photos maybe by December of this year. So stay tuned for that update. Here, if you don't want to use the EnGenius local splash page, you can also redirect them to an external splash page. But this one is different from redirect URL, just to avoid confusion, because a lot of our clients get confused between redirect URL and external splash page. So again, redirect URL means after authentication, you want to redirect a client to a specific page. So they would be brought to the address that you type in right here. Redirect or external splash page, the difference is that instead of using this local splash page for authentication, you have your own authentication system, maybe a web server or a hotspot gateway server, third-party device where clients can connect to. So it's not just a web page. It has to be a specific authentication page as well. Here under scheduling, it's basically when you want your Wi-Fi to be on or off. If we enable it, and then let's say I set it to always available. So 24 hours, your SSID would be broadcasting. Clients can connect to it no matter the time. If I set it to, let's say 8 to 5 every day, so the Wi-Fi network would only be available from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Afterwards, it will be disabled, meaning it's not going to broadcast any SSID, and you wouldn't be able to connect to it. It's not going to be hidden. It's going to be totally disabled. For some office environments and schools, this one is very useful. Maybe it can save you a bit of power consumption as well. So maybe every Sunday, I know that nobody's there to use Wi-Fi, so I just set it to unavailable. Saturdays as well. So with this setup right here, it means that I'm only able to access my Wi-Fi network from Mondays to Fridays, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So the schedules can be fully customizable as well. So let's say I want to enable it only on Tuesday. So let me do that just now. Yeah, just to show an example, let's say I want to enable my Wi-Fi system only on Tuesday. So this is how I'm going to do the setup. So the rest of the days would be unavailable. It's only broadcasting on Tuesday. So this is how I can customize it. Okay, let me show you guys real quick regarding Cloud Radius users, because it's also tied to the SSID. So if I enable Radius authentication using EnGenius Radius server, so I can add the user right here. So you have to use an email. Let's say, let me type in my email. And then if I have multiple SSIDs, I can select which SSID would I allow this user to authenticate to. So very useful if you have multiple SSIDs with VLANs. So here I can see when I created this account, which SSIDs can it connect to, and what's the current status. So on the SSID portion, I haven't mentioned the limit. So basically you can create 8 SSID profiles from here. That's a mix of different functions, even if you're using one access point. So let's say I have the ECW120, the Wave 2 2x2 access point, and I wanted to broadcast 3 or 4 different SSIDs with different settings, different captive portal settings, different profiles. So it's good that I can do that on the system. So for example, let me create another SSID. Let's say the first SSID is using a voucher system, and then this one may be social login. So let me apply that. Okay, so now my access point would be broadcasting this two SSIDs. So you can see that even if I have a mixed type of SSIDs, different profiles, you're able to have all those on a single access points. Some brands, they try to limit it. On the controller, you can have one set of captive portal profile on a specific device. So here we try to not put any type of that limitation on this system. So let's say you want to create another SSID for the admin usage with no restrictions at all. You can do that as well. So again, all the SSIDs that you create here, up to 8 SSIDs, that's a mix of 2.4 or 5 gig, would be applied to all the devices under your access point list. So right now I only have one, but if you expand it, you can see what are the SSIDs available for this access point. So here, test SSID and test SSID 2. So if let's say I have like 10 access points, and then out of those 10 APs on the same network, I want to disable one of the SSIDs. So it's good that we can override this function as well here. So for example, this particular AP, I don't want it to broadcast SSID number 2. So I can just enable the option and then either hide it or totally disable it. So if I disable it, 1 out of 10 of my APs would not have SSID 2. So we have the option to override that. That's very different from our Easy Master setup. Because from the NSky series, if you have 10 APs on a group, all of them must have the same SSID. You can't hide some of the SSIDs from it. So this is another good customization from our APs. Do you guys have any questions so far? Let me just check the chat real quick. Okay, there are a couple of questions here on the chat. Let me just read through it, guys. So one question here is, let's say we have 8 SSIDs on dual band. Will it affect the speed or concurrent number of users? So the more SSIDs that we have, the AP would do more processing. But in terms of its effect on the speed, basically it's still tied on the hardware. Let's say the ECW 120 can handle 120 concurrent users. Even if I have multiple SSIDs, but it doesn't reach 120 users, the speed will still be the same. If let's say I have over 120 APs, my speed will just be divided amongst those number of concurrent users, regardless of how many SSIDs I have. So for example, I have 5 users connected to 5 different SSIDs on the same access point. My speed would be divided amongst those 5. Unless, of course, I set traffic shaping and then I limit the speed. So then you can have more users. Okay, another question here is one access point, how many SSIDs would be best? So it depends on the network. Again, we don't force any limitation on the access point. The maximum number of SSIDs that you can have are 8 profiles per access point. You can use all 8 profiles, it doesn't matter. You can also see your access point CPU processing if it affects it, but it shouldn't affect it. And it will mainly depend on how many clients are currently connected to that access point. Yeah, so while we're on the cloud, let me show you guys the access point CPU usage, just in case you haven't seen this function. So here I'm going into one of my APs. Here you have real-time metrics on the backend system. So the real-time metrics right here are real-time. So you can see the CPU usage, memory, cache, and so on, as well as the throughput on 2.4 and 5 gig. So if you see CPU usage running at 100%, then something may be wrong with that access point. Maybe it's overloaded. Maybe there are like 300 clients connecting simultaneously. But even if you enable multiple SSIDs, you'd be able to see that it doesn't affect the CPU usage that much. Also the memory usage. Yeah, by the way, here, Since I'm on this access point, I can also see more SSID information. Like just now, I disabled this SSID. I can configure the setting right here. I can also check how many clients are currently connected per SSID, per band. So for example, SSID 1, these are your clients on 2.4 and 5 gig. This is a test AP, so I don't have any clients connected right now. My second SSID, and then it will show you this number of clients as well. So here, if you want to monitor the throughput, one good thing about the cloud is we have very rich statistics, which we're still adding as the days goes by. But you can also see what is the throughput consumption for that particular day or week or month. What type of traffic. You can narrow it down per SSID, or you can also see it on all the SSIDs. So let me go to our live network just to show you guys. Okay, so these is one of the access point on our system right now. As you can see, we have 4 SSIDs running. So if I want to see the consumption on, let's say, an office bypass 5 gigahertz for the month, then it would show that statistics here in the bottom. Let's say here from November 1st until the current day, you would see the consumption. When was the day that it has the most throughput? How many clients are there? Okay, let's view all the SSIDs. So let's say at this particular day, so 16 clients connected on the 25th at 6 p.m. If I move back, I can see more details. What's the traffic and so on and so forth. So if I want to view the client detail, so I can also see who connected on what particular SSID. So right now we haven't enabled client timeline yet, but soon you'll be able to see the action of the client. For example, this particular client device connected to which SSID, which access point at what time, and then if he has a problem on the network, it will also tell you what specific problem this client has. Is it the password that he keyed wrong? Is he too far from the access point? What's his uh, connection rate? What is his signal level when he connected to the access point? And what's his bandwidth consumption? So right now, let's see, where's my PC? I think this is my PC right here. So my consumption is pretty high right now because I'm using Zoom. Okay, yeah, so more questions here. One question is, can I generate 100 vouchers in one time? The option to generate multiple vouchers in bulk will be added in the future, but we haven't added that yet. So yeah, basically you'll be able to generate a bulk number of vouchers in the future. So if you guys have any questions, you can just raise your hand on chat, or you can just type it in as well. By the way, towards the end of this session for today, we're gonna have a giveaway. So the draw will be done by Nancy, our product manager. We'll be giving away an EWS 377 AP. That's a 4x4 Wi-Fi 6 access point. So in summary, in an overview, you can see what's going on right here from the main SSID screen. Here I have 4 SSIDs, almost the same settings for all, except for the VLANs are different. The two of them are running 5 gigahertz, two of them are running 2.4 only. And then two of them are on VLAN 1, the other two are on VLAN 10. Okay, another question here. How many SSIDs can be created? Yeah, you can create a maximum number of 8 SSID profiles per network. So when I say network, that means on this particular hierarchy. So this right here is our hierarchy system. I'm going to have another session about that. But basically here on my hierarchy system, let me expand it. So I can create multiple organizations. Sorry, wait, let me mute. Okay. Yeah, so from here, this is my hierarchy system. Here on the hierarchy, the building icons are your organizations. So inside that organization, you can have subfolders. And on a subfolder, you would have your networks inside. So as you go over different networks, it would contain different configuration per network. So the network here, like this tree right here, are your access point groups. So let's say on this particular group, I have 4 SSIDs. I can have a maximum of 8 profiles here. Okay, another good question here is, does the cloud management portal lose function if the local AP lose internet connection? Basically, our EnGenius cloud system is purely cloud-based. So that means that you won't be able to configure an access point if it cannot connect to the internet. But if the moment that it happens, the AP will still function as normal. For example, my AP is broadcasting an open SSID or an SSID using WPA2 PSK, a password. So clients would still be able to connect to that AP if it still has local traffic. But if it requires that the access point to connect to the cloud, let's say I'm using our cloud radio server or I enabled captive portal system. So in that case, the AP needs to communicate with the cloud service. So those services won't be available unless the AP restores communication back to the cloud server. But aside from those two things, if the AP is just broadcasting SSIDs for local internet, intranet, or internet traffic, if it loses communication to the cloud system, the AP will still function as normal. Yeah, so I guess we have time for one more question. Here, okay, there's another question here. How many access points can the EnGenius Cloud solution support? So, good question. Basically, for the EnGenius Cloud system, the number of ABs that you can manage is unlimited. So despite using either a free account or the license-based account, both would have a free number of devices you can use. So if you're managing 100 APs, 1 AP, 1,000 APs, let's say if you have a big telco client, you have like 100,000 APs. So we'd be able to support that on our backend system, on our server. So one good thing about our server, maybe I go through this on another day, is we're using an FaaS system or function as a service. So it means that our cloud is very modular, very robust. We do maintenance on the background, but this will not affect the current sessions. Let's say, for example, in 1 week's time, we want to add more RAM on our server. We want to add more CPU. We want to add a new feature on the cloud server. We're not going to go offline and do maintenance. So we're adding these features on the background while you guys are using our cloud service. So whatever we do in the background will not affect how you manage your access points. So it's like zero downtime, unless of course, let's say Amazon data center closes down or something, or cuts communication, then we would lose access because our cloud is hosted on AWS.